anybody know what this is? Yes, I know. It's the color blue. But can you guess what object it is? Let's zoom out. What about now? How about now? A little further. Any guesses? You're right. It is a paper plate. Today we're going to look at a paper plate and figure out how it can help you when you are remembering how to add and subtract fractions. All right, so good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Hold on, I gotta find myself. Ooh, sorry. There I am. Whatever day you're watching this, this is our Monday math lesson for Monday, April 13th. April 13th. Let's look at the math activities for this week. All right, so this math looks very similar. Okay, you're not going to see that strap every single time I do this. All right, so this math activity looks similar to last week's as well. All right, so remember, just like last week, do not click the turn in button until you have completely finished everything in this entire presentation. This week we're going to be looking at comparing, no, we're not looking at comparing fractions with denominators. I'm going to have to change that. By the time you look at this, that will be different. This week we are actually looking at adding and subtracting fractions with like denominators. So by the time you look at this, I will have changed that. All right, and here we have the 9 critical thinking traits. Every time we do a lesson this week, I think one of the questions at the end is which trait did you use? So kind of going over and taking another look at these traits. If I can get them, there we go. Examine, communicate, inquire, strive, reflect, link, create, adapt, and collaborate. All right. And then here we go. This week's lessons are right there. Please make sure you are working on your DMP. That is found under the extra math activities. Your DMP is something that's going to keep that math brain sharp and continue to go over all the things that we have learned this year. If all you do is focus this week on adding and subtracting fractions, then you will quickly lose all the things we've worked so hard to learn so far this year. All right, and then there is the assignment or the activity for today. All right, so before we actually get started on that, I'm going to show you a couple of things. All right, let me get this in my hand. So I have some paper plates that I have, a couple of paper plates that I have marked as a whole. I've got about 4 of those that I've marked as a whole. But then I also have some paper plates that I cut here into a half and a half. So if you have paper plates at home, feel free to make yourself some models so that when you're adding and subtracting fractions this week, especially when we get up into the higher mixed numbers, that maybe you can have a visual model. So then I also prepared the 1/3. Now, put it all together, and you've got the 1/3. Now, if I were to put these right on top of the other, they're probably not exactly the same, but it's going to work for our model. And then I also created my 4ths. I created 6ths. And I created some 8ths. Now, as you can see, when I put them right on top of the other, they are definitely not all the same size. In a perfect world, Miss Turney would have created something that was all the same size, but I didn't, and that's okay. We can use them at least for today's models. Okay, so I wanted to show you in our science notebook, we have already done adding fractions. Here on, it looks like January 16th is when we looked at adding fractions with like denominators, and we had a question about, they were canoes, that's right, and they were silver and brown and green, I think, and we were adding the canoes together. You had a total of 10 canoes. There were 3 green ones, 2 brown ones, the rest were silver. We added the brown and the silver, 5/10 plus 2/10 okay, equals 7/10. And we did that together, and these are the notes that we took. So we have done this. This should be familiar for you. We were looking, continuing here. We did some more over here. This was adding fractions that were less than 1. We're going to get into this today and a little bit later next week. Okay, so this should be a review. We have done this before. So I'm going to start with, I think I'm just going to start with a number line I created. Okay, all right, so I created this number line. And one way to add and subtract fractions is by looking at it on a number line. Here we go. So I have the 0, the 1, and the 2, and I've broken up this number line into fifths. So as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts between the 0 and the 1, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts between the 0 and the 2. Okay, and if I were going to look at some addition of fractions, okay, if I wanted to do 3/5 plus 4/5, so let's say that I had that problem. 3/5 plus 4/5, okay, they have the same denominator and they have different numerators. You do not just add and add going straight across. That's a common misconception for students who have not studied fractions before, okay? But if I had here, where would my 3/5 be and where would my 4/5 be? All right, so my 3/5, 1/5, 2/5 would be right here. And then if I wanted to add another 4/5, I would jump up 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I would be here. So there's two ways that you could write that, okay? You could write that that was 7/5, which would be correct, okay? But we talked about in class how that would be considered an improper fraction when you have the top number that is bigger than the bottom number, okay? So a better way to write that, here's 3/5, 1, 2, 3/5, plus 4/5, 1, 2, 3, 4/5 is right here. A better way to write that would be 1, and here's 1/5, 2/5. All right, would be a better way to write that. Or if I were going to look at adding fractions, and I wanted to look at my paper plates. Let's say I wanted to do something like 2 1/4 plus 3 1/4. So let me write that down for you. 2 1/4 plus 1 3/4. Still have the same denominator. We're looking at fourths. This time I'm going to use the paper plates to add them together. All right, so let me create 2 1/4. I don't need the halves or the thirds. I'm going to put those away. I'm going to use my fourths. All right, 2. There's a whole paper plate. It'll be easy to put that on the ground. Here we go. All right. 2 1/4 is the first fraction, plus 1 and my 3/4. Right there. So we're adding 2 1/4 plus 3 1/4. Well, if we take our wholes, 1 whole plus 1 whole plus 1 whole, that equals 3 wholes. 1, 2, 3. And we have the 1/4 from the first fraction, and then we have the 3/4 from the second fraction. My number, or my answer, would be 4. And that's just a good way to kind of model that. All right, so let's look at the actual taking up page 120 that you are working on today. Pretty simple assignment. Oh, step on my paper plates, if you ask me. All right, here we go. What fractions, we're adding fractions first. When fractions have the same denominator, you have to add the numerators and keep the denominators the same. So remember, the numerator is the top number, the denominator is the bottom number. So if we're going to do 2/3 plus 2/3, that would give us the answer 4/3. All right. The model shows another way to express that 4/3 is basically the same as 3/3 plus 1/3. Since 1/3 is equal to 1, 4/3 can also be seen as 1 1/3. So that's taking that 4/3 where you have a big number on top and a small number on bottom and changing it to a mixed number. So this is an improper fraction. You can't have a bigger number on top than on bottom. So you're going to change it to what we call a mixed number. Now remember, a mixed number just means that it's got a whole number and then it has a fraction. That would be considered a mixed number. This would be considered a fraction, but if I have a whole number before it, that would be considered a mixed number. All right, so it shows us a picture here where it takes 2/3 right there on 2/3 because it's taking these right here. This is that first part, this 2/3 right there. Okay, that's our 2/3. And it's adding in, okay, another 2/3. So here is 1/3 and another 1/3 makes 2/3. So what would that be considered? This would be one whole, because since this is broken into thirds, all of this was colored in. So that's one whole and then a third of another one. Okay, so that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4/3, or another way to look at that is 1 1/3. All right, and then you can also look at it with subtraction as well. Okay, so I'm going to get my number line again and show you the subtraction. All right, I'm going to use, let's use eighths this time. Okay, all right, so if I had a problem like 5/8 minus 3/8. Okay, so if I wanted to go to 5/8, so here's my eighths. Notice between 0 and 1, I have 8 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections. 7 lines, but 8 sections. So if I wanted to take 5/8, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, right here. And I wanted to subtract 3/8. I'm going to subtract 1/8, 2/8, 3/8 is what I would subtract. What answer would I have there? That right there is 2/8. So that's what it would look like on a number line. So if I had 5/8 minus 3/8. Okay, now, really simple way to do that. 5 minus 3 is 2, and then the denominator stays the same, 8ths. Now, hopefully some of you are looking at this 2/8 and you're thinking, ooh, Miss Turney never wanted us to leave our fractions like that. She always wanted us to simplify them. So if that's the case, and I was going to simplify my 2/8, what number will I be able to divide both of these by? Besides, of course, the number 1. I can divide them, always divide them by the number 1, but I can divide both of these by the number 2. And if I were to divide both of those by the number 2, that would give me 1/4. So to reduce or simplify 2/8 would be 1/4. So a number line is one way to look at it, okay? Another way, if we were going to use our little fraction plates, I guess, I can still use my fourths over here. All right, if I were going to do 3 and a 4th. Okay, so let's do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1/4. Okay, and I want to subtract 1 and 2/4. Okay, so where's my other one? I want to subtract 1 and 2/4. Okay, so now remember, I'm subtracting this time. I'm subtracting this time. Let's put my pen there. Is that my subtraction sign? That's my equal sign. There we go. 3 1/4 minus 1 2/4. So if I'm going to subtract 1 whole, then I can take away 1 whole from over here. And then if I'm going to subtract 2/4, come over here. So, oh, wait a second. Those are wholes, and there's not 2/4 to subtract. But what do I know about that whole right there? I know that that whole right there should be broken up to, or can be broken up into 4/4. Okay? So, if I were to take that, I also know that that whole could be broken up into a 1/2 and a 1/2 as well. And notice that my 2/4 right next to each other are basically a 1/2. So if I wanted to subtract 2/4, it'd be the same thing as subtracting a 1/2, right? Okay, so I could subtract 1/2 of that. Okay, well, let's see. That gives me 1 and 3/4, if I were to look at it that way. All right, we can look at Thinking Up, page 120, and look at the subtraction right here. Is another way of looking at it. I drew 8s. So there are 8 8s right here. Okay, we have 7 8s. There's 7 or 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I'm a dork. All right, there are 7 8s because that's what the problem says. 7 8s. When fractions have the same denominator, you subtract the numerators and you keep the denominators the same. So here I have drawn 7 8s. I'm going to take away 4 of those 8s. 1, 2, 3, 4. What do I have left? I have 3 8s. All right, so in looking down here on the try it, some of the easiest work that you will do this week. All right, so looking at number 1 and 2, we'll do together, and then I'll let you pause it so that you can do some of the other ones on your own. All right, I have 4th 6th plus 5 6th. And remember, the denominators are going to stay the same. The numerators are what I add. Okay, so 4 plus 1 is 5 6. Not an improper fraction. The top number is smaller than the bottom number, so I'm good. All right, number 2, 9/10 minus 3/10. My denominator is going to stay the same, but my numerator, 9 minus 3 is 6. Your answer is 6/10. Now, if you wanted to reduce that and you wanted to simplify that, and here's the thing, guys, when you guys get to 5th grade, it's just going to be one of those things that you are always going to be expected to do, is to simplify it. What number could I divide both of those by, besides 1? I can divide them both by 1. I could divide them both by 2. I can't do them both by 3 or 4 or 5. So if I divide both of those by 2, that is going to give me 3/4. That's how I would simplify that. All right, so why don't you pause the video and do numbers 3 through 9 on your own. All right, here we go. I'm wondering how many of you actually pause your video. I hope you did. That way you know that you can do these on your own. Because if you don't pause your video and you always just let me give you the answers, then on Friday when it's time to actually do the parts on your own, it'll be a lot harder. All right, so for number 3, you should have gotten the answer 9/8. Notice that 9/8 is an improper fraction. The top number is bigger than the bottom number. So 9/8 is the same thing as 1 and 1/8. Number 4, 3/5 plus 1/5 is 4/5. Number 5, 5/4 minus 4/4 is 1/4. Number 6, 6/5 minus 3/5 is 3/5. Number 7, 1/4 plus 3/4 equals 4/4. And 4/4 is the whole number 1. Number 8, 2/3 minus 1/3 equals 1/3. And then number 9, 1/2 plus 1/2 is 2/2, and that equals 1. All right, make sure you answer. In what ways did you use examine as a trait when you completed all of these fraction problems? Make sure to answer that question as well. All right, that was pretty simple and a really good review. Have a great day. See you later.